Tonight we have 3 talks from interdisciplinarians. The lineup is, we're going to have Annie Cattrell, artist, and Marius Kwint, art historian first, Mr. Wellcome, who's a poet, and then after the break we'll have Melissa Fisher, artist, and Mark Henner, scientist. The connections, they'll talk about their practice in different ways and demonstrate their practice in different ways. But one of the things that connects the presentations tonight is the process of collaboration and the negotiated practices between disciplinary practitioners. The first pair is artist Annie Cattrell and curator Marius Kwint. They're going to talk about their current collaboration exhibition, which is on at the moment, entitled Transformation. And this is at the Science Centre at Anglia Ruskin University. As the title suggests, the subject is metamorphosis, from ancient bodies to modern materials. Annie Cattrell teaches at the Royal College of Art and was previously reader in Fine Art at Montfort University. She has completed several important public art commissions, including the award-winning new Biochemistry Building at the University of Oxford and at Oxford Brookes University. And she's currently lead artist at the new museum site at the University of Cambridge. Marius Kwint is reader in visual culture at the University of Portsmouth. His curatorial credits with Annie as a contributing artist include Einfach Komplex on branching forms in science and visual culture, and the highly popular Brains at Wellcome collection in MSI Manchester. And in 2015, he was co-curator of the critically acclaimed Venice Biennale event, Frontiers Reimagined. So I shall hand you over to Annie and Marius, I think.
Thank you, Heather, for inviting us and for that very nice introduction. So you'll see from the poster image on the left is a bit squished, but I'm being sort of typographically pedantic about this because I work with a few graphic designers, but you'll get the impression from that. So Transformation is a new project by Annie Cattrell, combining the disciplines of dance, sculpture and art history with audio, video, motion capture and 3D printing techniques. And for Annie, it has been a departure in methods, but also a revisiting of her ongoing source of inspiration, which is Gian Lorenzo Bernini's famous Baroque sculpture, Apollo and Daphne, or at least we call it Baroque now. A Baroque sculpture, Apollo and Daphne, in the Borghese Gallery in Rome of 1622 to 5, as you'll see illustrated on the right here. Back in 2010, she talked and I wrote an article really referencing this kind of pivotal point in World Sculpture News about how she first saw it whilst on the Helen Chadwick Fellowship at the British School of Rome in 2000. And she was profoundly influenced by the young Bernini's portrayal of a moment of transformation, carved as it is from solid marble. In conversation then, we sustained the idea of recruiting Bernini in a more concentrated way for a further creative project. And what we'll talk about today is the first realization of that ambition, thanks to the fortunate coincidence of our obtaining a grant from the Henry Moore Foundation, and Annie inviting me to curate the public engagement program, including an exhibition that was attached to her having been commissioned for a public artwork to be installed on the exterior of Anglia Ruskin's new science building later this year. So, just to briefly consider Apollo and Daphne, it depicts an episode from the ancient Greek and Roman mythology as told by 1st century Latin poet Ovid in his epic tale of creation and history, Metamorphoses. Mischievous Cupid has wounded the youthful god Apollo with a golden arrow to inflame his desire. He then pierces the nymph Daphne with a leaden one to prevent her reciprocating. Apollo sets off in pursuit of Daphne. Exhausted after many hours of fleeing, she prays desperately to her father, the river god Peneus, to turn her into a laurel tree rather than be caught. Bernini's tour de force shows the moment of change when Apollo finally catches Daphne and her skin becomes bark, her hair branches and leaves, and her toenails roots. So this definitive, masterful depiction of a classical tale, as told by Ovid in his kind of epic interweaving of creation myth and history, is partly, it's actually quite timely in a way, because Ovid died in exile for reasons that remain obscure in present-day Romania exactly 2,000 years ago this year. And he was revived, perhaps most strongly, during the Renaissance and Baroque periods as a narrative source for art and literature, not least by our own Shakespeare, for example, in the Pyramus and Thisbe episode in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And during the 17th century, there are numerous translations over the years, many of them very beautiful. And one that particularly struck me when I was kind of looking at this source, a roughly contemporary one by George Sandys, written sort of during the period of the English Civil War, and expressing really a desire to sort of reconnect with a kind of pre-lapsarian past, a mythological past when, you know, the world was in flux and transition, as indeed society seemed at that time. And he was kind of stationed just outside Oxford, where he wrote this quite famous translation of, I think, 1632. And he says the opening lines are, "Of bodies changed to other shapes I sing." So that kind of fairly simple encapsulation of the principle of metamorphosis rather appealed to me, and the idea of kind of working that through an artistic project. So Ovid's shapeshifters seemed to convey, or perennially seemed to convey, elementary moral and physical truths, that appearances are mutable and that fate can twist arbitrarily, especially in the hands of deities with ignobly human impulses. He also highlighted the power of the artistic and poetic imagination, by which things can become other things through metaphorical representation. In our modern era, science has revealed far more spectacular and astonishing marvels, perhaps, of flux and transmutation than Ovid could have imagined, but many would argue somewhat at the cost of intense specialization and a limitation on large-scale public understanding. So in the exhibition in Cambridge at the Ruskin Gallery at Anglia Ruskin University, we installed selected bibliographic displays with many of Annie's preceding artworks, articles and essays and pictures of them. And biographical notes, which you can pick up over in the publication by the door over there, in this booklet that we had, rather well designed by my colleague at the University of Portsmouth, Sandra Zellner. All this helps to suggest how Annie, in her career so far of public art commissions and pioneering collaborations with scientists and scholars, has reopened the sense of wonder and material poetry, if you'll forgive me this paean of praise, in our own bodies and the world at large. She makes artworks that lyrically enjoin our sensibilities while drawing upon specific knowledges and utilising cutting-edge technologies, identifying forms and patterns that usually actually exist somewhere or somehow, and are therefore not strictly abstract, but which always indicate the presence of the ineffable and the infinite around and within us. Now, I first met Annie at a symposium organised by my then head of department, Martin Kemp, and his co-curator and fellow art historian, Marina Wallace. Both of them, their work will probably be familiar to many of you here. And this was in preparation for the Spectacular Bodies exhibition, and was held in Oxford in 2000. The glass lungs that she had recently made struck me as beautiful because they united form, observation and concept in ways that inspired my incipient curatorial ideas, and she was good enough to loan these and other works to exhibitions on which I subsequently worked, and one of which Heather mentioned was the Einfach Komplex one on branching forms, where the lungs appeared in Zurich at the Museum of Design there. The main exhibits, if you travel to Cambridge, that you'll see at the Ruskin Gallery are based on an intensive research trip to Rome during a balmy December 2016 with dance artists Andrea Buckley and Charlie Morrissey, to whom Alison Proctor, then a producer at Siobhan Davies Dance, had introduced us. Also, we were with filmmaker and artist Francis Scott. Now, when in Rome, we were hosted and advised by Marina Wallace, who was a native of that city, and we were unable to obtain permission from the Borghese Gallery authorities formally to photograph or laser scan Apollo and Daphne as we had originally planned. And that was in spite of repeated email entreaties and the calling in of contacts. In situ studies were therefore constrained to observation, discussion, drawing, sound recording, memorization, and physical emulation. And along with nearly everyone else, the odd surreptitious use of a camera phone. So afterwards, outside in the Borghese Gardens, Andrea and Charlie devised performances in response to their studies, and later in the sequences that we will cite and show elements of here, did so again in front of the camera in the more secluded and salubrious surroundings of Marina's family residence, the Villa Il Cardinale, which dates, like Ovid, from the 1st century AD. Then, Andrea and Charlie later recapitulated their movements in the cutting-edge motion capture studio at the University of Portsmouth under the supervision of some colleagues there. Annie subsequently rendered and reworked the resulting data for 3D printing, and the fascinating entanglements that you will see in the exhibition are based on the actual traces of markers worn by Andrea and Charlie all over their bodies on special motion capture suits as they performed a single sequence lasting for a few minutes. So these are initial steps in a sculptural and interdisciplinary journey that we hope will take further and bigger shape. Art that is safely historical is one thing, but art history, creatively embodied, critically evaluated and transmuted between media is another. And we believe still quite a distinctive and adventurous approach in contemporary art terms. I embarked on this project because I wanted to be as closely in as possible on the creative process as an art historian and a curator, and in that respect alone it has been fulfilling and highly educating. And it's given me quite a lot of insight into the appreciation for the level of commitment and sheer stamina, as well as, of course, talent and sensitivity that's involved in the making of any artwork for public display. So, Annie.
Yeah, to flesh out, what I was going to show was some of the lead-up images that informed the making of the work for the transformation exhibition, and some other pieces of work that I've made which has involved collaboration, and then perhaps if we've got time, show some of the large-scale previous commissions that I've made. So this, for those, there may be people who are applying, because I think the deadline's tomorrow for some of them. British School at Rome, I'd really recommend it. It's a fabulous place, melting pot for people to go to. These are the studios on the right, and you get a front door key for that central section there. It's a building by Lutyens. It was a very rarefied place. It was fantastic. So as Marius said, we wanted to laser scan, or it was my kind of, I wanted to laser scan the Daphne and Apollo. It's not because I wanted to replicate it, it was more to do with just data capture. And one of the things that really interested me when I was at the British School at Rome, I'd gone there to kind of look at the wax cadaver work in the Specola and around Rome, the other museums. But what I got really interested in was the actual kind of sculpture that was was all over Rome. And it wasn't so much the story behind it, the narrative, just the sheer kind of tour de force of the making of these sculptures that really kind of excited me. So these are some of our illicit photographs. So we were sort of carrying them around, and Charlie and Andrea were much more able-bodied than I certainly am. We're getting on the floor and taking them. And I was really interested to invite Charlie and Andrea to come with us because they choreograph their own work. They use their bodies as their instruments for communication, as it were, in terms of dance. And Andrea is a rolfer, and Charlie does a lot of educational work as well, workshops. So I was really interested, and I hope that they would like it as much as I did. But there was also an element of worry that they might feel that it was just over the top and so forth. But we had lovely conversations, looking at the detail, which you can only, you can't really see unless you're there. Walking around it, these are some of the images of us trying to kind of work through our ideas. Francis on the top right, who's a videographer and a fantastic artist, and Andrea and Charlie just there, and Marina was there. So these were some of their beginning kind of iterations of it. They were looking at their phone and then trying to kind of reimagine it. And what I really liked about it was that I asked them to do whatever they wanted. They asked me what I wanted them to do, and I said, well, can you just kind of work through it? So we're outside the Villa Borghese, and what was really nice about the way that they work together, they don't always work together, but when they do, they know each other really, really well, and they improvise a lot. And I like the fact that they could both take the weight of one another. So it kind of redefined that sort of male, female kind of usual role. I really enjoyed that when I saw it happening. So in the garden of Il Cardinale, which is a very beautiful place, they were very good. They said, what do you want us to do? So I said, well, listen, I'd really like to see your legs. So they took their legs off, their trousers off, and we started to kind of film, and Charlie sort of went into the bush. And then they started to kind of try and adopt the pose, but I got more interested in a way of the before and then the after. They got into this kind of recreation of the Daphne and Apollo. And it was partly them kind of imagining it. It was like a physical imagining of them moving into the pose that seemed really exciting. And then the bottom right one kind of shows them walking off as if kind of just shaking it off and going out, which was another interesting part of it. Again, these are some of the other stills of the films that were on in the Anglia Ruskin at the moment. And these are the close-ups. And when we were filming, I was asking them if they could talk while they were filming, while they were doing the movement. So there was quite a lot of sound recording that went on, which we didn't actually use in the end. But it's actually interesting just to hear, to allow their kind of the sounds that they want to make. And you can see that Andrea's kind of almost laughing, and there's points when Charlie's kind of making, letting the air come out of his mouth in quite an audible way. So yes, this is the motion capture. It's used in all sorts of films nowadays and so forth, and animation. This is Charlie, rigged up. This is them, with us gathering the data. And this is the actual show. It's quite a difficult one to document, so it doesn't feel as though it fully represents it. But the idea is, it's an art school like this. It's a gallery in the middle of an art school. You have to walk through the gallery in order to get to your studio. So there's kind of rooms at every corner. And embedded in the walls there are 10 monitors. So I actually made the piece of work to fit the gallery provision, as it were. So each one is a different film in a loop of Andrea and Charlie trying to get into the pose and then come out of the pose. And then, oops, sorry, I'll just go back a minute. There's a very large monitor there, and that one is the one of them close up. So, and what's really great, when we were installing, although it was over Easter, we noticed people sitting and kind of staring at it. And I kind of asked some of them what they were, what were they thinking, and they were kind of enjoying the fact that they couldn't predict what was happening and what was going to happen next. And quite a lot of them are going, for interviews and going for exams and things like that. So there was quite an interesting sense of corridor, if nothing, some corridor in the space. So this is some of the data we got. Again, difficult to show fully, but it's very, very highly complex. They are, Francis and I were sort of standing in the middle, and they were adopting the pose in a certain kind of frame of the camera, and then they'd move around us, and then they'd come around again. So we actually almost became the sort of sculpture, the static ones in the middle. So they were trying to recreate this sort of sense of adopting the transformative pose, so to speak. And these are for about a minute. Oops, sorry. And that's one of them close up. I don't know how clear that is, but it's very, very complicated. And that's on the top right bit there is just an illustration of the way that Andrea, who tended on this occasion to be lifting, who would put her arm out. And that's kind of the kind of lines and definition that you get from that. It's really difficult to photograph this work, but essentially they went in cases, and the lighting became quite important, quite sort of significant. It felt like it was sort of extending the case beyond it. That's one close up, which I think can begin to make it out a bit more clearly. But this show, if anybody happens to be in Cambridge, is on until 4:30 on Saturday afternoon. If you'd like to hope to show some of the work down here, we haven't got any exact venue yet, but there's a few things brewing. So just briefly, because in some ways the reason why I was there was because I've been picked to do this commission. I've made a piece which is about the kind of transformation from hot to cold, and it's a very large piece. which is going to be made on the surface, on the kind of outer part of the new building. And it's difficult to kind of explain this piece, so we've tried to, because it's actually still being fabricated, so that these are made of thousands and thousands of these small pieces which change colour, and they will respond to, whatever the weather and the sunlight's like. That's a larger version of it. So they're almost like this kind of idea of voxels or pixelation, and the idea of some kind of grid system that is very responsive, and hopefully through time it will remain interesting for people to look at. I wanted to talk a bit about, I know we don't have a huge amount of time, but a little bit about other collaborative works. I've worked up in Orkney. You can tell there's a slight twang Scottish left in my accent. I've been here for a long time, so I didn't need to double the Heriot Ward. But anyway, it was a Heriot Ward, and working there with scientists because of the tidal energy and wave power research. So these are some of my photographs watching the cliffs in Orkney, and actually you don't get, there's virtually no interruption between America and Orkney in terms of land mass, and that felt kind of significant politically as well as anything else. So I've made some work using wave machines and also had a solo show up in the Pier Art Centre called Fathom, and so this is me recreating just through memory the sea by modelling it, not any technology involved in this at all. So that's it. And it was quite interesting to have that sort of separating out as if you took a kind of chunk. Somebody once said at a talk that I gave, or did you pour plaster onto the top of the surface of the water, which obviously just goes insane. But the point being is it wasn't that amazingly similar, but what was interesting was that it sort of felt like it was in a state of flux and change, which interested me, and how you can make that happen in a kind of rigid material, so to speak. So the sea's outside, it's the harbour, and that was a slight worry when I was installing whether or not it would hold up to looking at the real thing, and that's it close up. But what would be quite nice is to show the actual film of Andrea and Charlie moving. So it's quite nice just to show it and you get a sense of the way that they're moving and the way that they're kind of physical exertion.
And in the exhibition, the subsequent screens, they're all different iterations.
They're all different ones, and they're all of them. So you can see their whole body, so that they're kind of we've got them so that they were kind of all going in the right direction, so to speak. So it was almost like them practicing, and in order to get in a way to this kind of larger version in the centre. And the conversations, we had a very good sound, well, Francis did the sound recording as well, but we had lots of discussions which are also represented in the exhibition. So the show, in a way, felt a bit like going back to art school, in the sense that it was a time to try things out and see what happened. And I think there's still more that we will do. And Andrea and Charlie were keen to perform themselves, but they're working with Siobhan Davis at the moment in a show that's been moving around from Scotland to Whitworth and Barbican. So this has been all happening simultaneously. We're in dialogue with them as well about future shows, if it's possibly.
Thank you very much.